Hey, what's going on, everyone? How you guys doing? Matt Jarbo here, $3 Theater, and I just got done watching The Mitchells versus the Machines a little bit ago. In fact, right now, my kids are rewatching it as I record this review, plus kind of just my general thoughts on it. This is one that is another movie that essentially is kind of a victim of the pandemic. It was originally slated to go to theaters. It was ended up being pulled from theaters and then ultimately sold to Netflix via Sony. And now the movie's out and a lot of people are watching it. And it generally seems like a lot of people out there are really enjoying this movie. And I think my attraction to it first came from the billing, which said from the creators of the Lego movie. That, of course, would be Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who went on to go and direct 21 and 22 Jump Street, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, the Lego movie, and ultimately get fired from Solo back in 2017. I'm a big fan of these guys as a director team and a producing team. But what I thought they were making this movie, because it felt irreverent enough to kind of be one of their films, it ultimately wasn't, and it was actually directed by other people and written by other people, and it was only produced by Phil Lord and Chris Miller. And like, I know this sounds kind of petty, sounds weird to say, but I feel kind of let down by that, and it did kind of sour my interpretation of the film. Mainly what I mean by that is the goodwill I would have given it had it been a Phil Lord and Chris Miller movie, I'm kind of taking away simply because it's not them. And I know that sounds petty, but I think we oftentimes tend to kind of overlook certain problems from our favorite filmmakers simply because we have that attachment. In this particular situation, that attachment isn't there. That's not to say that the movie is bad. It's actually pretty good, but it does kind of start to fall apart when you get to the third act. When you get to the climax, the movie just becomes, imagine the movie starting like Fast and the Furious 1 and then it ending like Fast and Furious 9, where it's like, okay, you've gone from a normal kind of family adventure bonding, drama type comedy thing to cars in space. Now, granted, The Mitchells versus the Machines doesn't go that far, but it might as well. It might as well, given the things that the family ends up doing at the end of this movie. That to me really kind of bothered me because it just didn't feel in line with the world around them. And if I had to kind of, associate this film with other Phil Lord and Chris Miller produced entries, I'd say it's a little bit of Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs in a good way, and a little bit like Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2 in not a good way. And I love Cloudy 2, but I had some problems with the story. So the story of this movie obviously is about Katie Mitchell, 18 years old, just graduated high school, on her way to California to go to college, go to film school. Her dad doesn't quite get her, isn't really the filmmaking type of guy. He's more of a handyman, salt of the earth guy, voiced by Danny McBride. And you wouldn't even know that it's Danny McBride. Like, it doesn't sound like Danny McBride almost ever. But Katie is voiced by Abby Miller, I believe her name is, and she is in Disenchantment, who I like her quite a bit. But then again, her character here, once I realized it was the same voice actress as Beans from Disenchanted, I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm just hearing the character Beans. And I really hate this when you've got like certain voice actors and they can really only do one type of voice, and that's how they kind of are for every character. Will Forte is a big example of this. However, I'm such a big Will Forte fan that I tend to overlook the fact that every voice he does is identical. Kind of like Ryan Reynolds movies, where you realize that Detective Pikachu sounded awesome on paper and the trailer looked great, but then you realize that you're just watching Deadpool ad-lib Pikachu. Same kind of concept here. But Maya Rudolph does play the mom, and Maya Rudolph does play a fantastic motherly character. And I'm a huge Maya Rudolph fan. So as always, I love anything she is in. And so again, the voice actors, they speak to me, but I can, they didn't really stretch their limits, so to speak. But the story is, again, the family is very separated, as a lot of families are in the digital age. And Katie is on her way to college. She gets in a fight with her dad. They break the laptop, and the dad's like, I got to fix this, because he's the fixer. So he decides to take them on a cross-country road trip all the way from the East Coast to California to go to film school, so the family, especially the daughter and the dad, can bond. And from there, robots take over, because that just happens. There's a company called PAL. It's clearly a rip on Apple, and it's kind of a rip on Google. And they create a new robot that's kind of like, your helper. It's your own butler robot, but it ends up being taken over by the AI, voiced by Olivia Colman. because she got thrown out. So she is trying to take over the world and destroy humans. It didn't really make, look, I get the plot, but they didn't do enough to really kind of like solidify that in regards to making it kind of stick within this world, you know? So I kind of felt like, just again, they needed a conflict. This was the conflict in order to bring the family together. Eric Andre plays the CEO. It's Eric Andre once again, kind of being like Eric Andre, nothing too special there. Again, I'm not a huge Eric Andre fan. So yeah, I was a little bit bummed, like, again, with the setup for it, because the voices of the two robots, or in fact, I think the voice of the two voices they use for practically all the robots, are Beck Bennett, who I'm a big fan of from SNL, and Fred Armisen, who I'm also a big fan of from, quite frankly, everything Fred Armisen is in. And they play the voices there, and they do a fine job kind of crafting these two robots that end up getting short-circuited and lose their programming and want to help the family. And that's kind of cool. They add them into it a little bit, but they don't necessarily add a whole lot to the situation. You've got like the joke about the Posey family, which is the neighbors to the Mitchells, and they're like the Instagram influencer families, and they're voiced by Chrissy Teigen and John Legend. And it's like, wow, you guys are really stretching here. Just little things kind of start. Now that I'm thinking about it, now that I'm talking about it out loud, there are little things that are a little bit nitpicky that I have that kind of take away from, I think, individual elements of the experience, but don't overall damage it. One of the things I did like, actually, was I thought the animation was fantastic. I thought that the Furby scene with the Mall of the Globe, they basically go to the, Mall of America, but they call it the Mall of the Globe in order to upload a kill code. And they end up encountering a whole bunch of Furbies, including the world's largest Furby, which can now shoot laser beams out of its mouth. Again, how did that happen? How did these creatures end up, these robots end up crafting all of these, like, gravitron weapons and gravity guns and things like that? It just doesn't make any sense because we don't see them do any kind of preparation. It's like they just have it all. It doesn't, I don't know. The plot, don't go into it expecting a complex plot, because the plot is entirely just about the daughter and the dad. And that's what it should be focused on. My daughter, during the movie, my 3-year-old daughter, was watching it. And when they were hugging towards the end, she was like, oh, she's hugging her daddy. And then she came over, gave me a hug. So I'm going to give it a pass on that one, simply because my daughter gave me a nice embrace. But, but talking about how it went from like totally over the top at the end. So when they get to the end of when they're going to Silicon Valley, they drive all the way there to upload the kill code directly. And when they upload the kill code directly, or they try to, they have to sneak in. And they sneak in dressed as robots, kind of similar to Star Wars, dressing as stormtroopers. And the whole time it's like they're trying to evade capture, and they end up getting into this magnetic rolly thingy that literally rolls up a 90-degree angle, and then it falls later on when they screw up and it falls, but everyone is fine when it lands. And then they get into the big finale where they strap the dog that apparently short circuits all the robots to the hood of the car. And drive him into robots, right? Never mind, no damage to the dog whatsoever. And then they drive that up the vertical rail, all while being magnetically controlled. And then they find themselves later on flying on the robots, because robots can all fly, by the way. They can all fly, and then they ride them like surfboards, and they use them like their chariots in battle. And they go become superheroes at the end, essentially. It lost me in the end on that one right there. There's like, you can have it be ridiculous, but at no point did anyone question the world around them. And that to me says a lot about the way that this thing is presented. They don't want you to actually think about how things are within the world that they've created. And I feel like that is actually a fundamental filmmaking flaw, because I don't believe that they fully believe everything that's happening around them. And then it just kind of takes me out of it. And I know what you might be saying, but Matt, it's a kid's film. Yeah, I know it's a kid's film. My kids are watching it again right now. I'm probably going to watch it 28,000 more times, as I have with like every other kid's film this year. So I get that. But, I recommend it, but I wouldn't recommend going in with like a lot of expectations. It looks flashy. It is flashy. There's a lot of internet references, a lot of internet humor. They reference youtube.com a number of times. They reference certain YouTube videos. It felt like it's made for, whatever the Generation Z is, or the millennials, or whatever we are right now. I don't know. It's aimed for those kids that are going to get those particular things. I will say though, I did like the younger brother Aaron, who was a complete like dinosaur file, and he just loved dinosaurs, and that's everything he wanted to do in life, to the point of even calling random people in the phone book to want to ask them if they want to talk about dinosaurs. And I like that because that reminds me of something like I would do, something I was really into. So I liked his characterization quite a bit. But yeah, I mean, the movie's entertaining. You know, I don't know what you guys think about it. I just wanted to kind of put my thoughts out there because it didn't wow me in the way that I think I was hoping that it would. And then I think that has a lot to do with the fact that I just, I just didn't really, I don't know, it didn't have that Phil Lord and Chris Miller charm that it would have had they directed it. You know what I mean? It's like, I know they produced like Lego Movie Part 2 or the second brick, but compared to the first movie, it was terrible. You know, it just didn't have that feel to it. And that kind of, and I really think that ultimately hurts this experience. But hey, I want to know what you guys have to say about this. Let me know down in the comment section. I appreciate everybody tuning in. I'll talk to you all later. Have yourself a great day. Thank you very much, and peace out.